we'll start off with Mr. Clary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witness. I'm from my riding of St. John South Mount Pearl in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I've seen a lot of changes in the salmon fishery, both the recreational fishery and the commercial fishery, in my 25 years involved in as a journalist and as a member of Parliament. Back in 1991, when they introduced a moratorium on commercial fishing on Atlantic salmon, we thought that that would be the start of a return of the salmon stock. That did not happen. The most recent news in Newfoundland and Labrador is a story just this week about a catch and release policy being implemented for Newfoundland and Labrador rivers, similar to what's going on in places like New Brunswick, which is unheard of in Newfoundland and Labrador. We've never had that before. We understand that, and you just outlined, the salmon are not coming back from sea. I'm sure, as you just outlined, there's an impact of on the fishing from in the St. Pierre corridor off southern Newfoundland. There's an impact on, you outlined 58 tons being caught in Greenland, plus probably another 10 tons poached. And then on top of that, you have the Greenland and then the Aboriginal as well. Now, we are federal members of Parliament, Mr. Croissant, as you know. And one of my big concerns here is whether or not, and you outlined a number of concerns from a federal perspective in terms of Canadian rivers are not being monitored. Less than 10% of rivers are being monitored. DFO's budget has been cut in half, I thought you said. You also mentioned that we need more enforcement. You talked about an independent review or an action plan funded. My specific question has to do with the role of the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans in doing all it can do to ensure our Atlantic salmon stocks are where they should be. Can you elaborate on that? I know that a few years ago there was the Cohen Commission of Inquiry into the disappearance of salmon on BC's Fraser River. Well, we've had a disappearance of salmon in East Coast rivers, of Atlantic salmon, for decades. And some problems are known, as you've outlined, but nothing is being done to address them. So my specific question has to do with the federal government and what it can be doing more of to make sure our Atlantic salmon stocks are where they need to be.
DFO could become the partner in research it once was. Let's say dating back to the 80s when the funding levels were a lot higher. We as a NGO, we have been doing a lot of research in the marine environment to try and find out, as we commonly use, to find out where the murder site is in the ocean. We've done a lot of work in the rivers. Our affiliates in all the provinces and our councils have been supporting work in rivers. We seem to have a pretty good handle on what's going on in the rivers. There's still a lot of issues to be addressed. Sometimes logging activities are not done the way they're supposed to, and they obviously affect the salmon's freshwater environment. But we know that the vast majority of the mortality is happening in the estuaries and in the salt water. And to be able to find that murder site. We've been tracking juveniles and also adult salmon for a number of years. We are starting to get a better picture due to the...
I'm going to stop you, Mr. Croissant.
Yes.
Again, just to reiterate the point that the chair made, I've only got a few minutes.
Yes.
So I need you to cut to the chase.
Okay.
What more can the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans do to ensure our Atlantic salmon stocks are where they should be?
To get involved again in research in the marine environment.
And now can you elaborate on that?
Well, they could be supporting our research activities in the marine environment, tracking juveniles and tracking of adult fish. We have a very good idea of what route the juvenile fish take to make it back to Greenland. We're starting to have a much better idea of what route the adult fish take when they leave their rivers. And this is based on the technological advances that we've been able to use. But that's an expensive proposition.
Can you put a dollar value on it, sir?
Give you an idea, the satellite tags that we use to track the adult fish cost $2,500 each. But the payoff is we know exactly where they go. We know how long they stay along Anticosti Island, how long it takes them to go from there through the Strait of Belle Isle, and where they end up west of Greenland.
When you talk about an independent review or an action plan, are you talking about an independent review on the role DFO plays in Atlantic salmon?
Well, first of all, I think what needs to be done is to put the financing in place so that it can be applied. A review was scheduled for 2014, which would have marked 5 years, but the policy's never been implemented. So the money has to be put into getting the policy implemented, and what we find inside the policy to be put into practice, which will have a beneficial effect on the salmon.
You mentioned the cost of putting a tag on one salmon, $2,500.
Yes.
But in terms of a more global figure for the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans in doing what it should do to conserve salmon stocks, what kind of figure would it take for DFO to be doing what it should do?
Bringing back funding levels to the 1980s.
And how much were they compared to now?
Compared to now, the latest figures I have for Atlantic salmon is we're looking at about $12 million, and that's down. If I can find my figure again. Down from 24 million.
24. So
yes.
So doubling the budget.
Yes.
Doubling DFO's budget of $12 million.
And there are things that DFO did in the past that were complementary to the work we were doing. In the initial days of our smolt tracking program, they provided transportation on some of their boats for us to be able to perform our research. Now, those boats were going out there anyways, so that was an in-kind contribution that is relatively easy to do. Starting up that type of activity, plus some real dollars to become a true partner in salmon conservation and the research involved to find out exactly what's going on.
It's hard to swallow. The conservation obviously is critical.
Yes.
It's critical.
Yes.
In Newfoundland and Labrador, in the Maritimes, in Quebec, in terms of Atlantic salmon. And I feel that we're doing our part in terms of retention, in terms of the tagging system, the whole 9 yards. But that's hard to swallow when you have a St. Pierre corridor where Atlantic salmon is being harvested. And in Greenland, for example, where the tonnage is being taken is probably around almost 70 tons. So I know that you outlined what Canada should do in terms of coming down on Greenland, in terms of asking France to become members of ISIS.
NASCO.
NASCO, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That came out wrong.
You had the spelling right.
But how much harder a stance should DFO, should the Government of Canada take on this? It seems like we're at a critical point.
We are indeed. If we are going to try to ask other people to do what we're telling them to do, we not only have to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. And what I mean by that is that we have to reduce at all levels our harvest of fish until we have a better handle on what exactly is going on. We believe quite strongly in managing rivers on an individual basis, but to be able to manage that way, you need data on those individual rivers to take proper management decisions. Well, earlier I stated we only have 10% of our rivers that are being monitored and or assessed. So we can't do a proper job to really ascertain what the situation is. And until we show concrete results in the reduction of our harvest, it will be difficult to sit down with the people on the other side of the Atlantic asking them to do the same thing.
Thank you, sir.
You have a minute left, no?
Oui, we do.
1 minute.
Monsieur Fisson, vous parlez français?
Oui.
Oui.